a different category and different scale. Now that visibility also has to be there because any mistiming of that is going to be absolutely disastrous. So that's the second point I would make. And the third point I would make is that we might have VGF, or whatever, but it has to be a competitive process because in maybe one or two projects on a project-specific basis, okay. But eventually we have to quickly transition to a competitive process because otherwise it's not acceptable in today's world.
Just quick points on the offshore wind, Windergy.
Yeah, I think offshore, I'm aligned with the two speakers. If I can take the liberty of just taking one step forward and talking about a third element, because I think time has come now that we have power islands producing green hydrogen and green ammonia. It's already being done elsewhere in the world. So you could probably have, let's say, a 2 gigawatt project which is self-sustaining. You build the wind turbines, solar, and the storage there. You use the grid to charge the turbines, etc. Then you cut off, you form an island, and you keep producing green hydrogen and green ammonia. And this setup acts as an excellent backup when the grid needs you. I mean, you continue to do a good job of producing, hydrogen and ammonia, but that's not like that's not sometimes the question of a lifeline. But the grid sometimes might require this immediate pumping in of power, and this island can then act as a backup and really do that for you. So I think that's one element that we need to clearly think about and try and form regulations around it and get the parties interested to implement that.
Thanks. I'm aware we're totally run out of time, but just last maybe one or two questions from the audience, if there are any burning questions to the panel. Yeah, Taneja ji.
Good morning, everybody. See, states are not ready or they are not obligatory to listen to the MNRE guidelines and other things. To mitigate this, I think in 2015, Renewable Energy Act was initiated, a draft is still pending. That in some way or the other may take care of the things what wind industry needs at the moment. Say, renewable energy policy was also added in 2020 amendment, but that also has been withdrawn. And original Electricity Act, there is hardly anything which favors the renewable energy. So what are your views on this, that should we get this Renewable Energy Act into force or not?
So to anyone in particular on the panel, or let me just check with the fellow panel, or maybe Dr. Chatterjee.
I think nobody better than him. Absolutely.
You're on mute, Dr. Chatterjee.
Sorry, yeah. No, my brief reaction is like this, that if Act were to be a panacea for all the ills, possibly we would not have any ills in the power sector post the enactment of the Electricity Act 2003. There are so many good and ideal conditions which have been created through the Electricity Act 2003, including for promotion of renewable. I mean, of course, there are more that one could possibly expect in the Electricity Act 2003, but then there are adequate provisions either in the Electricity Act 2003 or through the policies, National Electricity Policy and Tariff Policy, which flow from the Electricity Act 2000, and also the regulations also which flow from the Electricity Act 2003. So they have been put in place, but then the issue is about that ecosystem, the resistance and several, competing demands of the stakeholders. I mean, in my personal opinion, only an enactment of a new law in the form of an RE Act really cannot resolve the burning issues that we discuss, through this entire session. You need, good intention, you need understanding on both sides of the stakeholders to make things happen. If a new act comes, it's fine. I mean, I'm not averse to that idea, but I'm saying that I personally have a very long experience of the legislation making process, the intent that goes behind that, and the implementation as well. So I combine in myself almost all these three. So that's what my personal opinion is that, I mean, what is really important is both stakeholders on both sides to come together and understand each other and move forward within the construct that you already have, instead of harping on a completely new legislation in the form of an area. Over to you, yeah. I think
Anish, you
Yeah,
want
I can't but stand in for Amit Kapoor, who's not here because he's in Supreme Court. And I must say that, we are terrible at framing new legislation, and I've seen multiple drafts of the new legislations which have come. They're all terrible. Okay, so best avoid it, because if you have new acts, it'll more complicate the problem than solving it. So let me provoke a thought on that, or opinions on that. Going on to the Electricity Act, that was one exception because it was a kind of a Rolls Royce of an act, and it was just a fantastic thing. You can do most things which you want to do under the act. You don't need separate legislation for that, including on renewable energy, as Dr. Chatterjee is saying. The only thing which it did not do is to rid us of this agency problem which we are sitting for time immemorial. Okay, so if you can rid us of this the agency problem, and if we can get an act for that, I think that's the only one which is required. The rest of it is all there.
Yeah, I think with those words, probably we can conclude, unless there is a last burning question. I'm pointed that we need to really close.
Ajit, just before that, just one line. I asked a senior advocate, and I obviously will not name him, about having two acts covering basically the same area. And can we do that? He says, yes, you should do it. It would be a lawyer's delight.
So we'll just conclude this session by thanking all the, my fellow panelists for wonderful session and interactions out here. I think there is hardly anything to summarize in a way. We generated so many ideas. I would request organizers to just collate this, and that's the action plan for work in progress and continuum. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Chatterjee.
Thank you for this wonderful interaction. May I request Mr. Pandit also to present the mementos to our speakers.
Dr. Chatterjee will can't pass it on virtually over here.
Thanking Mr. Anish Dey. Thank you. Thanking Mr. Mahesh. Thanking Mr. Bhamra. And I request Mr. Gurunathan to kindly present the memento, expressing our thanks to our moderator, thanking Mr. Pandit. If I can request all the speakers for a group photograph, and with that we close the session. So with that, we move into the next session. That's a presentation we have, presentation on Site Right Tool. I invite our presenter, Mr. Joe Kiesecker, Lead Scientist, Nature Conservancy.
Okay. Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here, and I really appreciate the opportunity to get a chance to talk to you quickly about a tool the Nature Conservancy has built in partnership with Vasuda Foundation, the Foundation for Ecological Security, and with CSTEP. The goal of the tool is to try to reduce conflicts, siting conflicts between environment and social values for renewable energy development. So why focus on siting? Well, the obvious answer to that is that we're going to need to build a lot of renewable energy. We've heard people talk about that throughout the conference. The other reality is that wind and solar require a lot of land, and a lot more land than traditional forms of energy, fossil fuel-based energy. Because of that, potential for widespread build-out conflicts is high. And it's those conflicts that can actually slow progress towards our low-carbon future. In fact, where we've done work like the SiteRight tool in other places in the US, we've seen the ability to sort of pre-think some of these conflicts reduces the potential that projects get canceled, reduces the permitting time for those projects, and at the end of the day, it reduces costs. So it's smart, both from the environment side, but also from the business side. I don't have to say much about you all are more and better understand the targets and goals that India set out. They are aggressive, but the progress has been incredibly impressive to see to date. But you're already starting to see conflicts around environment issues with both wind and solar, as well as social issues that are playing out in the headlines in your newspapers. We've done some projections. This is from a number of years ago, looking into the future with the targets set for the 2022 goal that are specific both for how much wind and how much solar on a state-by-state basis. We projected those footprints out on the ground using a business as usual, so it's basically following the patterns that have been driving wind and solar from the past. And we found that there's potential for a significant amount of conflict. We've also looked at the present as well as sort of the past using an artificial intelligence algorithm that we built with Microsoft. So it lets us look and locate where all solar arrays and wind farms are. And then we looked at what was the land cover on those developments prior to the projects being built. And so this is the results of that for solar. Solar has over 70% of the development happened either on agricultural land or natural habitats. And that's, would consider those to be high conflict. Wind does a lot better. Good to show this at a wind conference that I think wind is doing considerably better than solar. About 27% of the projects that have been built either on agricultural lands or natural habitats. And you can actually see the breakdown in the bar on what agricultural habitats where things have been built. At the end of the day, though, the breadth of the resource is very large. Whether you're looking at wind or you're looking at solar, this is actually from a global analysis that we did. We estimated the potential for renewable energy development would be needed to meet the Paris Climate Accord and the potential for low conflict lands. And we found that there's over 17 times the amount of land needed to meet those targets. In India, it's about 10 to 12 times. So there's flexibility on how that gets developed. It's not going to happen by accident. So unless we're proactive in our planning and our thinking, those conflicts are going to continue. So the idea with SiteRight, if we take the steps today to start to plan for renewable energy, incorporate some of these values in, we can reduce some of those conflicts. And again, hopefully reducing those conflicts is actually going to facilitate the transition. So SiteRight, I'll talk a little bit more detail, was born out of that idea. There's a number of modules. At the core are a set of ecological values. And we've talked to a stakeholder group that informed us on what values we should include. Some of these are global data sets that anybody can get access to, but some of them are specific layers that have been developed in partnership with partners that are specific to India, and in turn, I think have, just in and of itself, have a lot of value add. We also included a bunch of data on social cultural values. Most of these really indicate where communities are connected to land or common land. So severing that connection would have an impact on those communities. We won't spend a huge amount of time going through a lot of the details for this since we don't have a lot of time. Like I said, there are 3 modules for site weight. The first is an awareness module. It was basically just taking the 2022 targets. We ran a series of scenarios looking at business as usual approach to development, and then looked at how impacts may play out on the ground. The site assessment module allows you to screen projects and understand, if you have a designated area that you're looking at, what environmental and social values are associated with that particular site. And then the planning module allows you to operationalize some of that environmental and social cultural data in the planning of projects, and I'll talk a little bit about each of them. So again, awareness module just allows you to visualize some of those scenarios that we've already built. You can look at it at a country scale, or you can zoom into each individual state. Again, the 2022 targets have set very specific goals for wind and for solar at a state level, and those are the ones that we're using. I think we're going to try to update these with new numbers, 2030, 2050 targets going forward. On the site assessment tool, it's relatively simple. If you have a shape file of your project, you can drop and drag, pull it into the tool, and it will map the site, and it will then create a report, again, with those environmental and social cultural values, and give you a sense of what's there. You can also access the data. The planning module it's based again on those social culture values, but what we use is a predictive model that looks at current wind and solar farms, assesses the conditions that are associated with those developments with respect to resource potential, electricity infrastructure, and other infrastructure, and allows you to see where those same kinds of conditions exist across the landscape. If you specify a set target that you want to reach, 50 megawatts of solar, it will look within those areas, but also incorporate those values that we use in the site assessment tool to identify a set of places that have the conditions you need for renewable energy development, but avoid conflict with those values. And I think, again, the data is the important part. So making the data available, I almost guarantee there are proprietary types of analyses that companies want to be able to do. It's going to be the access to the data that's ultimately going to be the use. But the portal is the starting point so you can understand and explore. I'm going to stop there, make a plug, show you the website, and then also make a plug for head on over to Vasuda's Foundation's booth, A129. Someone will demo the tool for you. There's also a bunch of other material that you can check out, documentation on the analyses and the approach. And I don't know if I was on time or over time. If there's time for questions, great. If not, also great.
One quick, very interesting tool, I'm sure that or maybe they can connect you.
All right, no worries. Thanks again, really appreciate it.
Just a minute of yours, if I can, request Mr. Gurunathan to kindly present the memento, thanking Mr. Joe. And you can always connect with him at the booth for any further information. Very interesting tool. I'm sure this is going to be, once the analysis and data is available, more analysis can definitely help in overcoming this. land problem site. Thank you.